In this video, we are going to find the zeros of this polynomial. It's looking like grouping would work on this one, but I'm going to save that for last. Because grouping doesn't always work, I'm going to do what we would do if there was no grouping option. We would use our calculator and we would type it into the table feature. So let's go ahead and do that first. And then we'll go back and play around with grouping later. So I would have 3x to the third power plus x squared minus 3x minus 1. I always like to start off at negative 10. It rarely goes past negative 10. I'm going to scroll down looking for 0 in the y column. Okay, there it is. Negative 1 is a 0 of this polynomial. So when I see that negative 1 is a 0, I can factor by using synthetic division. So looking at my coefficients, which are 3, 1, negative 3, and negative 1. So I bring my 3 down. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Add these up, I get negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Add these up, I get negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Add them up, and of course, I get 0. Now, these are the coefficients of a trinomial. The trinomial 3x squared minus 2x minus 1. Now, the 0 of negative 1 would come from a factor of x plus 1. So far I have factored this polynomial down to this. Now, I'm betting that this trinomial, shown here in pink, will factor more. So let's try to factor this as a binomial times a binomial. 3x squared will factor only as 3x times x. 1 can only be 1 times 1. Now, inner plus outer must equal the middle. Inner, I have 1x. Wait, that's weird. Put extra marks in there. My bad. Inner, I have 1x. Outer, I have 3x. I'm shooting for a middle of negative 2. If I have negative 3 and a positive 1, that'll give me negative 2. So there's my positive 1, and this will give me the negative 3. Positive 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, so that works out. Okay, bringing down the x plus 1 that I've had for a while. So once you have factored it, you can set your factors equal to 0 to find your zeros. So here I have x plus 1 equals 0, 3x plus 1 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. So that's x equals negative 1, which I already knew would be a 0 from the calculator, but it's good to see it again. Hello, negative 1. Good to see you again. So I've got 3x equals negative 1. If I divide by 3, that gives me x equals negative 1/3. Okay, and here I'll add 1, and that will give me x equals 1. So I have positive and negative 1, and I have negative 1/3. Okay, so that seems to be option A, positive negative 1 and negative 1/3. Now let's go back and solve this by grouping. Remember, grouping is where I take these two terms and I take these two terms and I pull out the GCF. From the first pair, I see x squared is the GCF. So if I take out my x squared, okay, now I'm going to see what's left on the inside. Now if I divide by x squared, then I see I have 3x plus 1. A lot of kids forget the 1. X squared divided by x squared is 1, not 0. Meanwhile, on the other pair, it's a little bit odd because there is no GCF. However, because there's a negative here, I need to go ahead and pull out the negative as a negative 1. Okay, and we will create some parentheses. So imagine that I divide both of these by negative 1. Well, that will give me positive 3x and positive 1. Notice how that makes the parentheses the same. So that means 3x plus 1 is a common factor. So I will bring that out as I would any GCF. And that's going to leave behind the blue stuff, the x squared and the minus 1. Okay, now hopefully you will recognize that x squared minus 1 can be factored as the difference of two squares, x plus 1, x minus 1. So now we have factored it. And if I set these equal to 0, this one will give me negative 1/3. And this one will give me negative 1. And this one will give me positive 1. Which again is answer A, just like we got before. So if you're comfortable with grouping, I think this was a little faster. If you're not comfortable with grouping, then you had to use your calculator.